all the changes that are happening in education right now. They're not, as much as people want to think that just Wakefield, it's all over the country around Common Core standards, technology in classrooms, supporting with the wide range of social and emotional issues that students are faced with today that maybe they weren't faced with 10, 15, 20 years ago. And how do we raise independent, confident children of character in today's ever-changing, dynamic, complex, and challenging society? And so the work of raising a child has become infinitely more difficult. And as a community, we really do need to join hands to support the academic, social, and emotional well-being of our children. And as a fellow parent, I'm an educator, but by no means am an expert. And myself, I'm very excited about some of these topics today. And I'm frankly, as I look at raising my daughter's 4 and my son is almost a year old, I'm worried and anxious about the job of raising kids and once they get to school and what that looks like as they go throughout the ages. So I'm very excited about the topics. We have a wonderful keynote that you'll hear his background, and you'll certainly hear from him momentarily. And then the variety of topics that we have, it's really a mishmash. There really isn't a theme to this university, as you can see. It's all over the map, which I think makes it intriguing. And so there should be something here for everybody today, whether you have a child that's recently born or you have a child that's in high school and looking at the next step. So really from birth to grade 12, I think there's topics of interest. We really want your feedback today as well. At the end of the second session, you'll receive an evaluation for the first and the second sessions. In order to get into our fantastic raffle, one of the prizes, which is lunch with me, although I'd much rather have, I really don't want to have lunch with you, I'd much rather have lunch with your children, so, there's a raffle, but to get into the raffle, you have to fill out the evaluation, because we want to know how we can improve and better serve and message to all of you how we can be partners in this work together. So with that, I'm going to introduce one of the outstanding partners that's helped the school district put this on, is Sarah Rorick, who's been practicing that, who actually is who leads our parent partnership work in Wakefield, and she's going to introduce our keynote. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you at the end of our sessions today, right before we dismiss. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful morning.
Hello, my name is Sarah Rorick, and I'm the chair of the Wakefield Parent Partnership, a volunteer organization that is dedicated to providing high-quality lectures to parents, teachers, and anyone else who is interested in helping children and students thrive. Before I introduce our keynote, I would like to take a moment to thank Dr. Reich for pursuing this idea of creating Parent University, and for his staff's willingness to arrange for many of the speakers and for childcare for this event. I would also like to thank the team of people who helped put this event together, including Dr. Reich, Karen Fitzpatrick, Nancy Milligan, Peggy Macaluso, Catherine Dingra, and Molly Goyette. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you. This morning, I am pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Rick Irving, who will talk about how to raise competent, confident children in a culture of pressure. Rick is a clinical social worker with over 37 years' experience working with children, families, and schools. He graduated from Brown University in 1974 and Boston University School of Social Work in 1976. He first worked as the clinical director of a residential treatment center for emotionally disturbed adolescents. During the last 35 years, he has been a social worker in the Andover Public Schools, maintained a private practice working with children and behavioral, emotional, and learning disabilities in Winchester, and consulted to parents and schools about their children's issues. In addition, Rick has done presentations in Massachusetts and in Europe, and has consulted to schools in cities such as Brussels, Amsterdam, and Rome. If you are interested in learning more about his talk, please pick up copies of the articles that Rick has recommended, which are on the table just outside the theater. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Rick Irving.
First, I want to thank you all for leaving room for my imaginary friends in the front row. They always come with me, they make me feel more confident, so I appreciate that. And then they critique me afterwards. The other thing that was left out of my background is I'm also a parent of 2 children. Actually, they wouldn't refer to themselves as children at this point. They would refer to themselves as adults. One's 29 and the other's 31. And which brings to mind a certain characteristic. Prior to having children, I was either rested or tired. Ever since having children, I've been either tired or exhausted. And I once called my mom when she was 87 and said, "When do you stop worrying about your kids?" And she said, "I'll let you know." So, which was not the answer I was looking for, but nonetheless, there it was. Couple things just before we start. There's a quote by H.L. Mencken that says, "For every complicated problem, there is a simple and elegant solution, and it's wrong." And I think that that's the thing to keep in mind about kids. It's the thing to keep in mind about any of the suggestions I give you. Some of them will work some of the time. Some of them may not work for you. Some of them may work longer than hoped for. The other thing that I need to tell you is that as a parent, when you look at a lot of parenting books, one of the things that they talk about is the need to be consistent. That's fine if you don't live with your children. But if you actually live with them, that's not an achievable outcome. If you're consistent 60, 70% of the week, you're doing a really good job. And just to give you an example, at one point, one night my wife was working and my kids, I think, were 3 and 5 at the time, and I thought I tucked them into bed, and I was returning phone calls to parents. I was talking to a mom on the phone, and they came flying down the stairs, screaming, yelling, your typical sibling fight. There's a point in the night when you are a great parent, and then there's 1 minute past that point, and you're not, and you're done. And, well, they had reached that 1 minute past, and so I covered the phone, and I said, "You get back up to bed right now." And they looked at me in fear. They've recovered since, but and went flying upstairs. And then I got back to the mom, and she interrupted my first word and said, "Oh, you don't know how glad it makes me feel to hear you yelling at your kids." So I just say that so that you can, if you're looking for perfection, we're all in the wrong job. Somebody should have announced that before adoption or conception. So anyway, confident children in a culture of pressure, how to raise them. The first thing to think about is what are children's goals? The first one is actually to avoid humiliation, to avoid losing face. Kids will go to enormous lengths, including sort of almost self-defeating defiance to avoid losing face. They would like to get through a day without being embarrassed. Not so different from us. We would like to get through a day without spilling coffee on our ties, without tripping up the stairs in front of coworkers, and so on and so forth. They also feel a pressure to avoid disappointing us. And that's important to remember because there are little ways that we express disappointment. I don't know how it was for you, but growing up, one of the things that I would prefer my parents be furious at me than if they said, "I'm really disappointed in you." Because if they said, "I'm really disappointed in you," it felt like this was a burden I couldn't get rid of. Whereas if they were mad at me, I could be mad back, I could save face, I could grouch around, and then I could get it right. The other thing is to feel successful at something. Because the true basis of confidence and self-esteem is not 40,000 times being told, "I love you, I love you, I love you." It's actually being taught being competent. Competence at something is what actually leads to a sense of self-confidence, and confidence leads to self-esteem. So if you think about this, if you can catch your kid being competent at something and point that out, it will increase that child's confidence, and this is true for any age, which will then increase their sense of self-esteem. So you can't go right to self-esteem. There's some things that are underlying that. Now, some of the social pressures that exist for our kids, they also exist for us as well. But one of them is advertisements. A lot of advertisements. I mean, the Dove commercials, for example, have been helpful in that they talk about, the kind of beauty that you really have to look at with young women as opposed to outside beauty. But nonetheless, our kids are bombarded by ads all the time. Anybody who watches TBS or any of the other cable channels, there's less programming and, well, there's barely programming, but there's some programming and then a lot of ads. And the interesting thing about those ads is they often are about other programs, and the TV programs that are advertised or that are on the air, if you look at the humor that's inherent in them, the humor is full of put-downs, sort of negative comments, kids sneering at their parents, parents being buffoons, this kind of thing. When I was growing up, and this will give you a sense of my age, and I'll tell you I'm 62, but the TV shows that we watched mostly were the Donna Reed Show, Father Knows Best. I mean, whoever thought of that now? Father Knows Best, and Leave It to Beaver. And if you think about Leave It to Beaver, Eddie Haskell was the worst kid on TV, and at least he was polite. He stole cookies from Mrs. Cleaver all the time, and he got Wally and the Beaver to do the wrong things, but nonetheless, he was polite. So in some ways, he was a very interesting role model. Then there's electronic high-speed communication. When I sit with, for example, teenage girls in my office, they have their phones on all the time because of this fear of missing out. If a text comes in, I sometimes say just answer it, because if they don't answer it, I'll lose them anyway, because they'll be wondering what will the other person think if I don't answer text right away. There's a whole etiquette, and etiquette's a funny word to use around this, but because if you're ever riding in a car with your kid, it's almost like you're riding in a car with someone who's not actually there half the time. They're on their phones texting, and you say, so who are you texting? A friend. Well, who's the friend? It doesn't matter, Mom. And you get this kind of sort of resistance about what's actually going on in your child's life. But it's also a pressure on them. It's not always a bad thing. I mean, kids used to hang out at the mall a lot, and the security guards would hate that. Now they hang out on, FaceTime, and if you say Facebook to kids this age, they'll, the middle school, high school age, they'll look at you like you're old-fashioned. But then there's peer pressure. Now, peer pressure isn't some guy in a trench coat coming up and saying to your kid, you want to buy a joint. Peer pressure, or that kind of sort of old-fashioned DARE program kind of pressure. Peer pressure is much more an attempt to fit in. And kids try to fit in starting very early, much more early in their development and in their, even in elementary school than they used to. And so you might go to the store and buy your daughter or son some outfit or shoes that he or she really likes, very proud of it, go to school, come back from school, I'm not wearing these shoes again. Why not? You love them. When we went to Marshall's yesterday, they're stupid. And it's simply because somebody in the upper echelons of the social hierarchy walked past your kid, looked down at her shoes, rolled her eyes, shook her head, and kept walking. So the shoes are now unacceptable. And if you think about that, there is that pressure to want to buy things to make things better. There's a lot of pressure, and that's partly the culture that we're in. It's a very consumer-oriented, materialistically based culture. And so there is a lot of pressure to buy things, and that if I have Uggs, I will fit in. If I have fake Uggs, I can't wear them to school. So the $29 Uggs, knockoffs, although they're either as good or better, aren't acceptable, and the $150 Uggs are what you have to do. And sometimes you do make that choice, because sometimes you have to do that to protect your children's sort of personal comfort in the school setting. They do worry about social demands, social acceptance, who's going to invite me to the prom, who's going to invite me to their birthday party. And they also have a little bit of a fear of demand from us. And I'll get into some ways we can lower that. Not that we are going to ignore and not try to lead them and teach them, but there's ways to do that without making them be fearful of the demands that we might have on them. And one final thing in this category, and I'll get into this in a little more detail, is being told you are so bright. Now, we don't mean that as pressure. We don't mean that as a put down. We mean that as a compliment. But from inside of a kid's head, being told you're so bright is actually an expectation that you're bright across all realms. And none of us are bright across all realms. Nobody ever calls me up to do a statistical analysis of anything. That's not a skill I have. So that's one of the, so if you think about the pressures that are on our children, those are some of them. There's many, many more, but I just want to cover a couple of major topics there. Now, the pressure on us as parents. There's a lot of pressure that we raise successful children. Now, successful children has a lot of definitions. I think of as successful children as children who feel confident about themselves, who feel like they can manage life. It's not the people who make the most money or have the best car in the high school parking lot. But it is, there is some pressure on us, and it happens on the soccer field. It can happen when you're out with friends. Some parent will make a comment about an award or about a college acceptance or about something that happened with their child where there was some recognition. And that parent may or may not have as their goal to sort of boast, but nonetheless, if your child didn't meet that or didn't get that particular award, you do feel a little bit one down. And so parents tend to make comparisons. We do make comparisons. You know, how is my kid doing? How is my kid doing next to my neighbor's kid? And so one of the things, the other pressure that we have on us is to make sure that our kids have options for the future. Now, part of exposing them to different events in life and different activities is to make sure that they have options. Now, one of the reasons schools have so many topics as part of their curriculum is to expose them. That works very well for a lot of kids. If you have a kid whose brain has specialized early, this is going to be a struggle for that child. But nonetheless, the idea is to provide a lot of options. On the other hand, this can also get out of hand. Let me give you a personal example. My daughter, who's now 29 and learning to be a speech pathologist, when she was in 3rd grade, she did soccer, as everyone did in our town, from kindergarten on. I imagine it's now starting at the preschool level, but so the soccer was the game in town. And Winchester, where we live, the girls' soccer team is, at least at one point, was known as, you know, one of the top ones in the state. And I don't say that as boasting, I say that as I really don't care. But nonetheless, here was the dilemma. So at the end of the 3rd grade soccer season, the coaches announced that there would be tryouts for the spring traveling team at the sort of the tail end of 3rd grade. And my daughter said to my wife, I don't want to try out, I'm not interested. And a mother came rushing over, she overheard the conversation, said, you can't let her not try out. And my wife said, why not? And she said, she'll never make varsity. And so my wife said, but she doesn't like soccer. You can't do this to her. She won't get, if she doesn't go on that traveling team in 3rd grade, she'll never make the varsity team in high school. And so my wife tried again and said, but she doesn't like soccer anymore. And she said, well, I just think you're doing the wrong thing. And my wife just said, that's possible. And then we kind of walked away. And my daughter has not been in therapy for not making varsity. I don't even think it's entered her mind. But it was just one of those events. And then just to give you an idea, even from my point of view, at one point, you know, my son had a lot of learning struggles through school, very concrete learner, language was hard for him. And so he applied to a number of technical colleges and did very, you know, he got into them. But then I remember asking his guidance counselor, shouldn't he apply to a Reach school too? And she looked at me and said, why would you want him to go to a school where he's going to be in the bottom 25% of his class for 4 years? And I thought, you know, that makes sense. And then she said, if it's important to you to have a name school, go down to the Harvard bookstore, buy the decal, and put it in your back window. And so I thought, I kind of felt a little embarrassed. And so there is no Harvard decal in our back window. But Alfred State College in the SUNY system of the College of Technology is in our back window. So, so those are some areas to think about from our point of view, the pressure that we're under. Now, in terms of what to think about regarding yourselves, think about what you were signed up for as a kid. Did you like what you were signed up for? If you didn't like it, how did you sort of get out of it? Were you forced to stay in it? Do you wish you had been signed up for something else, like guitar lessons instead of soccer, instead of tennis, instead of volleyball? Because right now, there is a fairly consistent pressure to sign up for something in the sports field. I have to tell you that from my experience with juniors and seniors, the only sport that's probably worthwhile is to have them sign up for crew and rowing, because that seems to be the only sport that gets you a free ride in college, which I think is also fascinating. But nonetheless, what do you wish for your child? Is it the same thing that your child wishes for? And this gets very complicated because we do try to live through our kids in some way, and it's not because our lives are empty. It's because if we had pretty decent lives and pretty decent experiences, then we want our kids to have the same thing, obviously, or better, and we want our kids to be able, and so we sort of defer to what was right for us. And so I got into Brown when people could get into Brown, okay? Back when tuition, and don't fall over, was $3,000 a year. Okay, that's how long ago it was. And we had no computers, we had typewriters. It's kind of cool. But what I do remember is actually, and I'm embarrassed to say this, pressuring my daughter to apply to Brown because I had such a great time there. And she said, all right, Dad, here's the deal. I'll apply to Brown, but you understand, if I get in, I'm not going there. I'm still going to go to Simmons. And so that's just where she wanted to go, and that's where she ended up. She ended up at Simmons. Funny story about Simmons, I was at one of the, talking about parental pressure, at one of the parent nights at Simmons prior to her acceptance, and it's an all-women's college, and there was a mom in the audience who asked one of the panelists, who were all students, you know, how do you meet your husband here? So, you know, again, she had something in mind for her daughter. The student's answer was absolutely perfect. The student said, we're a women's college. They know where we are. So I think it was relaxing to the mother. But again, that was another form of, I met my husband in college. How's my daughter going to do this at an all-women's college? So one of the things to also ask yourself is, do you actually have a pause button in your own life? Are there times when you actually can demonstrate sitting still and just either thinking, doing a crossword puzzle, reading, something that doesn't have to do with getting anything done? And the reason that I ask that is because it's very hard for us to do that sometimes. If you think about dinner table conversations, when I was growing up, it was always about, you know, I grew up in a foreign service family, so it was political events and current events and things like that. But I noticed at our dinner table conversations, and when I say dinner table, it's not like everybody sat down for 45 minutes, okay, so don't expect that. If any of our kids stayed at the table for more than 18 minutes, we were doing well. But it's more about scheduling. Who's going to do this? Who's going to pick up the kid? What's the plan for this week? So again, one of the things to think about is, are you able to demonstrate a sense of moments of peacefulness that are not goal-directed, and that you then label them as, that was very relaxing, I'm glad we did that. And the reason for labeling it is because if you don't label it, your kid won't notice that that's what just happened. They'll just figure it was a weird pause, and they don't know what happened and why that was the case. You know, that you were just reloading for the next schedule. So one of the things to look at is your own outlook. Do you look at problems as big disasters, or do you look at them as problems to solve? Example, you go outside, your car has a flat tire. It's very rare these days to have a flat tire, but nonetheless, if they're doing roofing across the street, you're probably going to have a flat tire because of the nails. But what do you demonstrate to your children in response to that? Is it, oh my God, a flat tire, this is, what do we do now? And then even if you know how to change a flat tire, if your reaction is highly dramatic, then you are inadvertently teaching your child to react in a highly dramatic thing to what is a relatively small problem. A flat tire I would categorize as a first world problem, not a third world problem, you know. So what you demonstrate, they pick up very quickly. I'm going to actually make myself completely vulnerable now and say, for example, when my son was 2 years old and I was driving along, somebody cut me off, and it was really, I was scared. I turned around, you know, rolled down the window, and gave the driver the finger. I never do this. Okay? So that's the embarrassing part. Okay, Rick Irving gave somebody the finger. And I'm not saying that you should do that, okay? It's not what was fascinating, the next day, he's there on the floor playing with his Duplos. One of the pieces doesn't fit, and he gives the Duplo the finger. And I thought, my goodness, he picked that up fast. You know, so if he's picking that up fast from the back seat, can you imagine what he's picking up if he's, you know, if I'm upset in the store or with the flat tire or whatever. So keep that in mind, that, you know, what you demonstrate gets through, and so your ability to demonstrate, and I don't mean you have to go into a meditative mode about your flat tire, but just say, wasn't expecting this. Okay, here's the plan. It's in the trunk. It's kind of an annoyance. I mean, you don't have to be happy, yay, a flat tire. Your kid will think there's something wrong with you. And then most of our kids think there is something wrong with us. So a couple things to know about your child's ways. And I'm talking fast because I know that we have workshops to get to, but one is their own level of reticence. Not every child is an extrovert. And being an introvert is not a pathological condition. Okay? It is a personality style. They may keep it, they may change it, but it's not pathology. It can be, any extrovert or introvert can become pathological if it's too much. Just like anything else, if it's too much. A certain amount of salt on your French fries is fine. You know, 14 tablespoons of salt on your French fries is not so fine. So again, it's the amounts that make a difference. Do they worry about new things? Because if they do worry about new things, they're likely to be more reticent. And that may be an indication more that they have trouble predicting or picturing what's coming next. So sometimes one of the techniques to use for kids like this is to say, oh, by the way, you know, we are taking a walk in the fells, for example. I don't want to go. Well, here's how it's going to go. We're going to go in this way. We're going to look for the trail signs. These are well-worn trails. We'll bump into a lot of people walking dogs, and I'll have my cell phone with me, and we'll dress for mud and for rain. And so that they have an idea of what this thing coming up will look like. The other thing to remember about your child, by the way, the word shy. Now some of you may say, I have a shy child. The dilemma with that word is it gets used to the child and becomes, they almost get locked into that perception of themselves. I'm a shy child, therefore I can't, therefore I'm not able to, therefore I need to stay quiet, whatever. Certainly there are shy children, but a lot of times these children are people who are actually watching how things operate. They want to understand how it operates before they inject themselves. And that's, if you think about that, that's actually kind of a healthy approach. Again, if they never inject themselves, then it's worth getting some advice about how to nudge them along. But another area to think about from your kid's point of view, the world is competitive, there's no question. But when it comes to sports and certain academic things, remember competition is only fun for the people who think they can win. For the rest of us, it's not fun. It's an opportunity to be seen as foolish or failure. So just keep that in mind, that the competition by itself, although you can think about it as preparing them for the world, that is sort of along the lines, not quite as harsh as, I got to toughen my kid up so he's ready for a tough world. Well, in fact, the way you toughen your kid up to get him ready for a tough world is you make sure that he's got a base of security, serenity. Doesn't mean you're not yelling at him sometimes, as I demonstrated earlier, but that you're giving your child a solid basis of internal stability so that when the rough world hits them, they're not knocked over. Because if they get rough stuff all the time, for example, in my school we get foster kids who've been in 4 foster homes before we get them, and then they're probably going to leave in another year. You could say, wow, that gets them used to change. No, it wears them out for change is what it does. And then when change comes along, they don't have much left to handle it. And then there is a need for downtime. Now, kids balk at this, but it is out of boredom that creativity comes, not trips to Toys R Us. It's out of boredom that a lot of times creativity and inventions arise. So if your child says, I'm really bored, you can say, yep, you really are. You've got a number of things in the basement or in your room you can play with if you want to. Those are stupid, I'm bored with those. Well, I bet you'll figure out what to do, but if not, come back in 10 minutes and tell me how bored you are again. In other words, you can keep the conversation going, but if you try to solve the problem instantly, you're rescuing them from something they don't actually need to be rescued from. So I mentioned earlier about confidence, competence, and self-esteem. So let me just give you a very quick version of what that actually is. Self-esteem is the ballast that we have, if you have decent self-esteem, that keeps you afloat and keeps you from tipping over in a storm. That's really what it is. Self-esteem comes from, basically it's a picture you hold inside of yourself that's been painted by your parents, your teachers, other important adults in your life over a long period of time. And it's not painted again by being told, I love you, I love you, I love you. It's being told by you being caught being competent at something or being valuable to someone. That's how self-esteem actually develops. It also shows itself as a willingness to try something new. Because if your confidence is high, I've never spoken to this group before, I've never been here before. So was I a little nervous this morning when I woke up? Absolutely. Because I wanted it to go well. But because I have some confidence about talking to groups, I was willing to come and do it, as opposed to being out in my car hiding and hoping Sarah wouldn't find me. So it's also the ability to mess up and not be angry for long. So when your kid does mess up, which they will, if you ask you, one of the most inefficient things to do is to ask your third grader to set the table. Okay, you ever seen a third grader set the table? There's more forks and knives. The plates, they're all in the wrong place, and it's not an efficient way to get a table set. Nonetheless, when the table is set, you thank your child for setting the table, and I'll get into some ways things you shouldn't do in just a minute about that. The other thing to remember about self-esteem and confidence is it's not arrogance and it's not entitlement. Now, in this world, and certainly in this country, we have met our quota and gone way beyond our quota of entitled, arrogant people. So we're all set there. Okay, we don't need any more. Which reminds me of the phrase, there's a phrase, the standard phrase, it takes all kinds to make a world. The actual truth is it doesn't actually take all kinds, there just are all kinds, okay? And some of them we have to work around. But anyway, the thing about arrogance is not self-esteem. Arrogance is the shell of self-esteem. This is more useful for you with your coworkers, okay? Because you will have some arrogant coworkers. The way I manage them is I feel sorry for them. Because if you have to step on somebody else to feel better, then you're probably not okay. So keep an eye on that. Now, some of the things about communication. So I want to get to some practical things too. One of the things that's very easy to do is make them glad they showed up. So when you see your kid or your kid walks into the kitchen, say, oh, I'm glad you're here, I need your help with. Now, depending on the age, if it's lower elementary, they'll be thrilled. Once you hit about 12 or 13, you'll get eye rolling. What now, Mom? You know, well, I need help with the groceries. Really? You know, well, they're for you. I didn't ask for these, you know. But nonetheless, the phrase, even to that age group, I'm glad you're here, I need your help with, is an indication to the kid that their presence in your household is important, that they're valued by somebody. Now, the resistance that you get as the kid gets older is the typical pre-adolescent and adolescent resistance to taking any advice from us while we're giving it. So I would try to use that. Another thing is don't be on the cell phone. Your kids will be on the cell phone in your car. But when you pick them up from school, don't be on the cell phone unless you're an OBGYN walking somebody through the delivery of a baby, okay? You don't really need to be on the cell phone. And the reason for that is when your child gets into your car and you're on the cell phone, what they do a quick analysis, which is maybe relatively, whether it's accurate or not, it's the analysis they come up with. And that is, I'm second in line. Okay, that's the problem. And those of you who have ever, I mean, we've all been through this, and if I had an answer for this, you know, I could retire. But anytime your kids are playing in the attic, the rec room, across the street, in another country, and you pick up the phone to finally make that phone call, within about 14 seconds, they're showing up with a request. I can't wait. And I'm convinced that there may be some sort of radio waves that get sent out to their brains, because I don't know any other explanation, sort of biochemically, but I think what's actually happening is, uh-oh, my mom or my dad's not instantly available if I need them, I better make sure that I can get to them. And so that, I think, is part of the reason that that happens. But basically, they're in competition with you talking to other people. Now, the way this could be helpful to you is if you know your child's in the house, you can call a friend, call the weather, call anything, and say, you know, I just got to tell you something my kid did that was really cool. Because when you hear, and this is true for us, when you hear a compliment about yourself, is my time up? When you hear a compliment about yourself that you did not expect, or that wasn't said directly to you, it actually means more than one that's said right to your face. And you can do that, you can set that up. You can make sure that your kids overhear you talking to another adult about your child. So another thing to remember is a lot of you will have very successful, competent children in a lot of areas. But remember, kids work to their level of confidence, not to their skill level. This is why you may have a kid who tests poorly on intelligence testing, but works really hard and does really well. It's because their confidence is high enough that they're willing to tackle it. On the other hand, you're going to have kids who really could get this homework done in about 7 minutes, but don't, because their level of confidence about getting it right is low. One of the things to look at is how to ask questions for kids. One is to, again, this has to do with helping them feel like they're competent in conversation with you as well. Try not to interrogate them. You can wonder out loud, I wonder how your school day went, and just let it float in the air. Because that puts it out there, but it doesn't turn it into an interrogation, which is what many, many kids feel like when they're asked about their school day. So those are a couple things. Just one more thing, and this is more for, I would say, either if you have a particularly grouchy child or a pre-adolescent or adolescent, which would certainly fit that category a lot of the time as well. By the way, the opposition, that stage, again, is not pathological. It's annoying. It's why the British invented boarding schools, but it's not pathological. The beginning of independence from you is ugly because it takes a form of opposition. For me to have my own ideas, I have to fight yours, even if they're valuable. So, especially if you're in the room and you're giving them. But if you want to help your child develop some tools, one of the things to do is to, and please don't expect you can do this all the time, and I don't think you should, but some of the most delicate information from a child is presented in the most unpleasant wrapping. So, math stunk today. You know, well, math's important, honey. It's not. It's a waste of time. I want to be an artist. Why do I have to take math anyway? And all of a sudden, you're now defending math on the curriculum, and you've lost your kid. The other side is if a kid says, you know, math's stupid. Why do we even have it? You know, the internal message from that is probably, I just blew my math test. Or worse, I blew my math test and somebody teased me about it. So you can say, if you go for the tone of voice or the sound of the voice, you're going to miss the inner distress. So sometimes it's much better to go for the internal thing and say, so math wasn't much fun today, huh? No, it was stupid. Any particular reason? Yeah, we had a math test. What's wrong with our teacher? You know, so, and the math test, and you just kind of go on like that in those kinds of conversations. So again, try to stay away. Now, there are times when you are going to, because the rudeness will be beyond what you want to tolerate, or because you didn't get enough sleep, and you're just going to fire back and say, don't you ever talk to me that way. And that's fine too, because they also need to be helped with sort of their own emotional regulation. I mean, I remember there were times, and I'm sure this is not unfamiliar to you, you know, I'd be in the kitchen, my son would be in the dining room table doing homework, and out of the blue, are you going to help me with my homework or not? It's like, I didn't even know you were doing it, but okay. So I go over and I say, oh, you know what, the decimal point's in the wrong place. I knew that. And so the invitation was, I need you, and I hate the fact that I need you, so to save face, I've got to, you know, be really obnoxious to get you over here. And now that you've given me the advice, I have to save face by denigrating you, you know. Now, none of us can tolerate that all the time. Like I said, we all yell at our kids, and that's not going to ruin them. Some of the techniques to avoid, though, when you're trying to develop confidence in the face of a highly pressured world is try to avoid sarcasm. They will use it with us. We cannot use it with them. Sarcasm is fine between consenting adults. It's not fine from adults to kids. And here's why. In sarcasm, the sound of the voice and the words don't match. I'm having a great time here today, okay? Now, the written transcript is, I'm having a great time. But the sound of my voice, which actually carries more weight, says, I wish I were anywhere else. So what happens is it cheapens the language. Kid feels he's been cut, but he can't see how that happened. Another thing to be careful of is quick reassurances. You know, I'm sure, honey, we can work this out. Oh, you know what? How about you try this? If you went to the doctor and said, I have a stomach ache, and the doctor said, here, try this prescription, you wouldn't take it. Or if you took it, you wouldn't fill it. And if you filled it, you wouldn't use it because the doctor did not hear the rest of the story, didn't hear all the details. So reassurances that come too quickly are more for our benefit, that we're uncomfortable about their distress. But quick reassurances fall on ground that isn't ready for that information. Try to avoid boring questions. And the most boring question is, how was your day, honey? Okay? And the reason that that's a boring question is it's a very tricky question for a kid. And the reason it's tricky is because I have to come up with a one-word answer that gets my mom or dad to shut up. Okay? So this means I have to average my day, which I'm not good at, and then figure out the high points and low points and give them one word. Because if I say, well, it was okay except for lunch, it's going to open a whole range of interrogative questions. So it's better to say things like, at some point I'd love to hear how your day went. the high points, low points. In elementary school, anybody throw up at lunch today? You know, these are interesting questions. These are things that actually, because otherwise what you'll get is, what did you learn in school today? Nothing. What did you do? Nothing. Did you have a good time? No. Or yes. And you feel like, well, why would you talk to me? You said, well, I just answered your questions. You know, so, and then, you know, you sort of retreat into your own corners. And just one more thing in terms of how to, before we get on to how to encourage your child to be strong in the face of various pressures, try to avoid the phrase, I'm at the end of my rope with you. Now, every one of us in the room has probably used that. I know I have. It's a statement of exasperation. If you've got an anxious kid, it's going to increase his anxiety. Uh-oh, my parent doesn't know what to do with me. But it's also not something that works, because one of the things I find fascinating is when you say to a kid, I'm at the end of my rope with you, the kid keeps doing the same thing because they want to see what will happen. It's the same drive that makes us slow down as we go past a car accident. It's this morbid curiosity. It's not, you know, we're not proud of it, but nonetheless, it's what we do. So, a couple ways to sort of keep your kids feeling internally calm and that you are on their side. One of them, and I'll just name a couple because I know we have to get to the workshops, but especially for pre-adolescents on up, but for anybody, when you're giving a suggestion, I call it dive bomb suggestions. You walk through the room, you drop an idea on the table, not a written idea, but you know, hey, maybe this would work on your bus ride, I don't know, and then you get out of there, okay? And the reason for doing that is not that you're trying to avoid it, well actually you are trying to avoid a discussion, and this is why. For a child to feel competent, the child has to be able to look at the idea without it being your idea. We don't need the credit for the idea, okay? They need to be able to take in the idea, mull it over and say, I don't know, maybe that'll work. Don't go back and say, so what'd you think of my idea? Because what you'll get is it was stupid. Or, yeah, it might have worked when, you know, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, but it's not going to work now. So, again, those kinds of dropping the idea on the table. Another thing in terms of helping kids develop a protectiveness about the world, kids are lousy historians of their own successes. They're pretty good historians of things that they failed, and part of that's neurology. The brain tends to collect negatives about 5 times faster than it collects positives. Negatives tend to be Velcro, positives tend to be more like Teflon. And there's a lot of evolutionary reasons why that's the case. It's part of the brain structure, which we won't get into today. But just so you know that kids forget how hard they worked to learn something. Once they've learned it, I mean, if you think back to multiplication tables, do you remember how long it took you to learn? Probably not. So if someone had said, wow, you worked on those for 3 months, you didn't quit, you finally got it, I'm very impressed, you might actually now remember that that was something that made you feel like you were competent. Now, another aspect of is when not to correct. The most likely times we tend to correct is when the kid has just messed up, because that's when we think about the advice and correction they need. That's the least teachable moment. Example, driving down a very icy street in Woburn about 10 years ago. I was going very slow, I thought, and the car gradually slipped. And I could see in slow motion that we were heading for a telephone pole, and there was nothing I could do. So I had already figured out, okay, 10 miles an hour was too fast for this road. And I hit the telephone pole and dented the car. The person who lived in the house right in front, right near the telephone pole, came out, and her first words were not, are you okay? Her first words were, this street's very slippery, you have to drive carefully. Now, I already figured that out. I figured that out about 3 seconds before I hit the telephone pole. Okay, so again, that was not my most teachable moment. You know, I had some emotional regulation at that point. I wasn't giving the finger to anybody. I learned that, so I just said, thanks for the advice. You know, and that was my outside voice talking. My inside voice was, are you kidding? You know, I know that. So think about when to correct and when not to correct. And the last thing on this area is stay away from the word appropriate. It doesn't mean anything, and we use it all the time. This is a typical conversation. Do you think what you just did was appropriate? Now the kid can tell from the sound of your voice that the correct answer is no. And then you say, don't you think you need to behave more appropriately? And unless the kid is really into driving you nuts, they'll say, yes, I understand. I'm glad we had this conversation. And there was absolutely no transfer of useful, supportive, instructive data at that moment. It's a word that doesn't mean anything. Okay, and the last thing is, okay, so we covered that. Now, a couple quick things about praise. And because again, what we're trying to do is give kids a sense of inner competence so that whatever the world delivers, and what it's going to deliver 2 years from now is different from what it's delivering in terms of pressure now, as it was different from 5 years ago. Try not to praise and correct in the same conversation. For example, when my son was in 4th grade, he brought to me a plastic model, first one he'd ever built. There was glue on everything. It was a disaster. But the wings stayed on anyway. So I had to bite my tongue, but I said, wow, Eric, nice job. You know, that you worked hard on that model. You know, that was a lot of work. What I wanted to say is, and next time, let me show you how to use the glue so it doesn't get over everything. That would have completely erased the praise. You go to work, your boss says, write me a memo about this production problem. You write the memo, the boss says, you hit every point, this was excellent. Next time, just try to keep it to 1 page. So you leave the office feeling I made it too wordy. Okay, so again, try to keep those separate. Praise with specifics. If you say, you know, I like, you know, you did a great job, or to a kindergarten, I love that painting, or whatever, any kind of praise, you need to have specifics to back it up, because otherwise a lot of kids think you just praise them because you happen to be in a good mood, okay? And they don't really know what they did that got the praise. So praise with specifics. I really like that painting, it makes me think of such and such, I really want to hang it on the refrigerator. Okay, that kind of thing. So, and then if you want to, every now and then, to again build up a sense of inner competence, say, you know what, you're the kind of artist who can use colors in a way that's very creative. You're a really creative kid. So now you've taken a general praise, I love your painting, to specific, this is why I love your painting, to, and those are unique to the situation and the painting. And then you transfer the phrase to something that's a quality of the child's. And so I'm creative. My mom or dad think I'm creative. That's cool. Phrases to avoid, because these are hidden pressure phrases. It'll be fun. Okay. All your friends are there. You should go. You know, these are things that we all say, but we don't actually explore why there's the resistance. I loved it when I was a kid, and you know what kind of response you get there. We paid a lot for you to be in this program. That's not as useful as, you know, what is it about this that's not working? Are you going to be a quitter? You know, that kind of thing, because then the kid is in a bind. I either, you know, then respond sort of obnoxiously, yes, I'm going to be a quitter, so, and then the conversation ends. And one of the best things to avoid is when you're trying to be encouraging, that's easy, you can do this. And here's why it's not helpful in terms of building an internal sense of confidence. I'm having trouble doing this. You come and tell me it's easy, I can do it. So already there's a disconnect. The second problem is, if I can't do it, then I'm an idiot because you've told me it's easy. If I can do it, there's no value in it because it's easy. So it completely gets lost. Now that's not what we intend, but nonetheless, that's there. And yours, yes? Are we out of time? Okay, let me finish up really quickly. So one of the things to think about is stress is part of growing. Achieving balance is part of growing. Your kids are going to experience stress no matter what. Our job is to make sure that we listen to the stress and help them find a way through it or help normalize. Yeah, that makes sense that you feel that way in this situation. So they don't feel crazy, so that they don't feel odd about this. And that way it doesn't overwhelm their sense of balance between stress and enjoyment. So just in conclusion, I just want to read something. I talked about a pause button. This is from the head of school at Rivers School in Weston. They've made some traffic changes. I need just 3-4 more minutes. And there's a lot of waiting in traffic for parent pickup and parent dropout. And he wrote, "From that time in traffic, something very special may emerge. The extra minutes to end an honest conversation, a smile, a reassurance from you that your child is still loved. This time may provide connections or philosophical insights. Can you force this conversation? No. Will you get silence most of the time? Yes. Remember, we are not using the cost-benefit mindset when it comes to our children. What's important is you've made yourself available." So finally, remember, your children are hoping for your help in navigating this world in which they're growing up. There's many topics today in the Parent University. Learn as much as you can. Your child is depending on you whether he or she knows it or not. You are that important. You have that much impact. So, as Joseph Campbell said, the late philosopher said, if you really want to help this world, you must teach how to live in it. So, best wishes for a wonderful day, and good luck with your most important job, and thank you for listening.
I'm Michelle Lebrecht. I'm a reading specialist over at the Greenwood School. I've been at Greenwood for 8 years as a reading specialist. Before that, I was a teacher up in Newbury for 11 years. So I've been teaching for 19 years. I had first and second grade looping classes for my first 10 years of teaching, meaning I had kids for 2 years. And then I switched to becoming a reading specialist because I always felt that I just needed a little more time with those students who were having difficulty with the reading process. And as a classroom teacher, I couldn't always devote all the time I wanted to those students. So going into the specialist area let me spend the time with those students, and I know it's been a great switch. Can you share with me where you are in Wakefield, or schools and kids? And
Yeah, sure. I'm Gina. My son is Joshua, and he's right now in preschool and Canterbury.
okay.
But he will be going to the Greenwood
Oh, excellent.
kindergarten, of course, in September.
Wonderful. This is Mrs. Clara, our principal at the Greenwood.
Hi. I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name?
Kalora.
Kalora. Exciting.
That is exciting. Yeah.
And my name is Jenny. My son Ian is a kindergartner at the Greenwood School.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
And so we just had our little conference the other day, and the teacher was talking about different reading levels and where kids should.
And then you come back at the end of the day and pick up. And then each offense is, the second time you have to drop it for a month, so. But we have parents who are testing their kids during the day, so
I know, I
it's
have a
really
friend who
hard
does
to.
that. I said, you're in the middle of class.
Right, and so
Doing.
that's really hard to, do. So in terms of the services, we have a school psychologist. We don't have guidance counselors, but we're hoping to get there. I know there's one covering the budget, and it's been back and forth. He's the only one, who's going to. So you have to know that we've seen it all.
Right.
There isn't a lot that we haven't seen before. So people are reluctant to come and say, my child's having social or emotional issues, but middle school kids by nature are social emotional beings. And so, correct, my friend over there?
Yes.
Students. And so, they are social emotional, and a lot of that is normal, but when it gets to a level that it's interfering with the daily activity of the classroom, then it's when it becomes a matter of concern. And so, the extreme is the suicide, ideations that we.
But it's powerful because it's quick. It's only 1 to 8 minutes. Some of the tests can be given whole class. Some of the tests are more specific. Some of them are, a one-on-one test. And so some days, like when we do Ames Web testing, and you have a kindergartner now, so you know that some of this testing is going to happen. Oh well, I guess it will be at Woodville. In Greenwood, that testing is going to happen, 2 or 3 times a year.
Oh,
And they'll be testing various things. But in any case, the nice thing about it is it's quick. and it's efficient for teachers to give. Good, finally caught up. It's accurate, and the nice thing too is, you can use this to generalize how they're doing. You can kind of get a good percentage, like 80% of the tests are fairly accurate as far as, standardized testing is concerned. So it does kind of correlate with standardized assessment. 80% of the time is,
And is
pretty
this
good.
something for you or for the parents?
I've shown it to you. I brought it out at some of our conferences,
Okay.
and I'm going to show you what it looks like.
Okay. She just tells me.
They're posting every day, whereas 500 million people sign up doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually engaging every day. Google Plus, LinkedIn, it's a little bit of a older age group, so when you're going to college, they'll probably go on that. Instagram, 100 million users and climbing. So again, Facebook has passed the 1 billion mark. I remember this was about October of last year where it passed the 1 billion mark. And if it was a country, it would be the 3rd largest country. If Facebook was a country, it would be the 3rd largest behind China, which is huge. There's so many people using this.
Does your site have demographics, right? You're giving us highlights, but does that website have demographics as far as who tends to go there?
For Common Sense Media, that
No, like Facebook or, all these different sites.
yeah, if you research like the demographics, you can find those. So like I said, with Facebook, the highest number of people joining are women in their 50s. So 37% of 10 to 12-year-olds are on Facebook, and
for the past 2 years as a community member and as a parent here in Wakefield. And I had professionally been working in Lynn, running prevention programs in the city of Lynn for the past 8 years. So now I'm pleased to be working in my hometown, 3 minutes from my house, and talking to my backyard neighbor Kim about what's going on and other neighbors, and really kind of taking the knowledge I have from effective prevention strategies and implementing it in Wakefield. And I'm so excited because we have our schools are engaged, our police are engaged, community members, parents are engaged. So I think we have a really bright future to really address this issue here in Wakefield. So today I'm going to talk about the current trends, what's going on around substance abuse, prevention strategies for parents. And just a little bit about Wake Up. It's a coalition of, we usually have about 15 to 25 people at our monthly meetings. We have everything from parents to pharmacists to the police chief to school officials. So we're really looking at this problem head-on, implementing evidence-based strategies. And how do you address substance abuse as a community? Well, it's really, I'm gonna ask you this first question. All right. What is your favorite thing about living in Wakefield? And all you have to do is use your clicker and click whichever answer you. It'll be interesting to compare the first group to this group. All right, let's see what the big response was. All right. Oops, sorry. All right, here we go. Your friends and neighbors. That was the top one to get. Friends and neighbors. So that's interesting because that's only.
Just brief comments before we do the raffle. I want to thank our sponsors who have provided these raffle prizes today. Harrington's, Lori's 909, North Ave Diner, Steve Mayo, who was offered to have lunch with him, which I think is a lot better company than me. Honeydew Donuts and Pastries, Honeydew Donuts was donating pastries and coffee. And I really want to thank Wakefield Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, which sponsored Rick Irving here today. So I thought he was terrific. Let's give them a round. I really want to thank the presenters who are, it's too many to name, that came and gave their time. We had teachers, we had community organizations, we had partners from Middlesex Youth Partnership. So I want to give them a big round of applause for their time. And the Wakefield Academy, which provided the child care today, free of charge. Let's give them a big And of course, our wonderful students that helped out both Wakefield Academy and here, our high school students that use them. And then I'd like to thank the TV production group that we have that filmed today. We have students from our TV production classes that will be putting snippets of this up on YouTube, hopefully. So let's give them a big round of applause. We'll share to promote the event next year. And then from my office, Nancy Milligan, where's Nancy? Over there, and Karen Fitzpatrick, who've done a tremendous, where's Karen? Who's my right hand. And then I do want to thank the 3 parents who were crazy enough to take me up on my offer. And I said I wanted to do this parent university. And they said, oh, we'll help. I don't know if they had any idea. They made the mistake of showing up at one of the walks around the lake earlier in the year. And one of them told me they were an event planner. And I said, you know what? Are you busy? And from January on to March. So they've been great. I want to ask them to come up. I do have a little something small for them. I just ask that Peggy Macaluso, Catherine Lindra, and Sarah Warwick really I've already signed them up to help out. Okay. So I'll just make a few comments and then we'll do the drawing. You guys can get out of here and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. But as I shared before, we really hope this is the beginning of a yearly tradition. We are really eager to hear from you the feedback on what worked well, and we knew full well there were things we were going to want to change based on how today went. So we hope we get feedback on how we can make the experience more meaningful in the future for all of you. I'm speaking for the Wakefield Public Schools now, that parents as partners cannot be lip service. We say that all the time, it's a cliche, but you really are a critical part of where I would like to see this school system go. If we really want to move this system from good to great and to excellence, we really need all of you to be part of that process. And as I mentioned before, the world of education is constantly changing, and the names are changing, some of the initiatives are changing. It's not just Wakefield, but everywhere, and it's really complex for even someone who's given their life's work to education. I'm confused. So I can imagine how parents feel about navigating the complexities of raising a child in schools. I certainly can understand how difficult it is to understand everything that's happening. We have a responsibility to make communication with parents and providing access to information a priority in our mission and our vision moving forward. And so I promise you, and I hope you hold us to that, because if we really want to push this system to be truly one of the best, in not only in this area, but in Massachusetts, around the country, we need parents. We need our families to hold the bar high for us. And as a fellow parent, I have exceedingly high expectations for what my children will get in school. And I ask that you do the same of us, but that we work side by side. I'm not asking for more complaints and calls from parents. But I am asking for you to work hand in hand with us to really demand excellence in everything we do. And so today is the start of that, and please be open with us about the information you need and require to make sure that you can truly help us do our jobs better, because we do need, there never has been a time where we need our families more to prepare our children for what lies ahead after they leave our schools. So with that, I want to again thank everybody. I want to thank you all for being here and give you a big round of applause. And we will do our drawing. Okay, we'll bring, you don't have to get up once we call your number. Just scream when we, okay. Anybody else need a raffle ticket? Okay.
Mix them up, put those at
Anybody
the
else?
bottom.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Pretty good. All right, take them up. Okay, this is for the North Ave Diner, $25 gift card. 627-435. Nice screen from the back. All right, for Harrington's $25 gift card. That would have been useful on St. Patrick's Day. 627-448. Lori's 909, $25 gift card. 627-452. This is lunch with me. Wow. It could be for you if you like to eat with me or your child. And I'll treat you, you don't have to pay. Pay my salary as a taxpayer, so it's the least I can do. 627-379. I spent a lot of time with her already. Okay. This is with lunch with Steve Mayo. 627-338. All right. Okay. All right. So we have a nice Under Armour Wakefield Athletics shirt and a hat, long sleeve. I like this one. Okay. 627-475. Hey, you have it memorized? You sure?
We need a confirmation.
Okay, the last one is another slow. Okay. 627-442. All right. Thank you all very much for coming.